We hear a lot of noise about how cows are contributing to global warming, which is an idea that's really struck me as rather specious right from the beginning.
If you want to talk atmospheric carbon, all it would take is all of our farmland to change 1% in organic matter. We call this mob stocking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration, fertilization. We spend as much time marketing as we do the entire farm production.
Really what you are is a communicator and
Yes.
a network builder. Well, why do I need to be fluent in my communication?
Yeah.
Why do I need to write? Why do I need to learn to speak?
The people who communicate lead their professions. Become a storyteller. Storytellers are what change the world.
Yeah, right. So I've been very skeptical about these ideas stemming from the WEF globalist types, that there's something pathological about the agricultural sector, and the dawning concern as well, or the building concern about the notion that pasture animals like cattle, for example, are bad for the planet. That just seems to me to be absurd on the face of it. I'd have to see a lot of data, so to speak, before I would regard that as credible. And I'm also interested in meat-based diets, for example, because they seem to be very health-promoting and highly nutritious. And so one of the things that I've wanted to do for a long time is to spend some time investigating the landscape of so-called regenerative farming. And I found someone to talk to, and there's other people who I could talk to as well, named Joel Salatin. And Joel has written a number of interesting books, and this will give you a sense of him right off the bat. The latest one was Homestead Tsunami, which is a description of, well, the dawning interest in homesteading as a potential choice of life, let's say. He's also written Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, which I love as a title. You Can Farm, which is partly what we discussed, and Pastured Poultry Profits, which is a book that documents a particular form of agrarian lifestyle as a solution to the economic problems that young people might be facing. So it's a pathway to a profitable, sustainable, and socially useful economic future. And so we spent a fair bit of time talking about all of these things to do today. And so if you're interested in that, then this is the podcast for you. Well, Mr. Salatin, why don't you start just by telling everybody what you do? Let's start from the beginning.
Sure. So we farm in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, which is in the western part of the state, known historically as the breadbasket of the Confederacy during the Civil War, where Cyrus McCormick invented the reaper, and that part of the Industrial Revolution really took place in 1837. And so we farmed there full time with a pastured livestock operation that doesn't use vaccines, hormones, chemical fertilizers. My mom and dad bought the original core property in 1961, so I was 4 years old. And we came there, and it was a gullied rock pile, cheap land. And Dad asked agriculture experts, how do I make a living on this small farm? And
small being what's the size?
So at that time, it was about 100 acres open and 450 in woodland. So it was very much a forest. It goes up along, one of those Appalachian mountains there. And then, the bottom land is out, from the base. And so 100 acres of decent usable land. That was one of the gullies we measured was 16 feet deep, 16 feet from the top to the bottom. That's a deep gully. But there were just, the hillsides were just gullies like that, like corrugated roofing from erosion back in, plowing in the day. And large areas, a quarter acre, that were just solid rock. 5 to 8 feet of topsoil had washed off over the years of tillage. And there was no vegetation. I remember as a child being able to walk the whole farm and never setting foot on a piece of vegetation. It was that barren. It was very, very poor, but it was cheap. And so that's
And worth every penny by the sounds of it.
well, so Dad says, well, how do I make a living on this farm? And it was, buy chemical fertilizer, plant corn, borrow money, build silos, graze the woods. And my grandfather, his dad, had been a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine when it first came out in 1945. And so he always aspired to be a farmer, but never got there. My dad was an accountant, Mom was a school teacher, and so he saw the chemical approach as a rat race.
Yeah.
Because you're always trying to outrun it's like a drug addiction. You're trying to outrun the adaptation of, the chemicals. They cannibalize in the soil. There's a lot of things that happen there, and so you're trying to chase that. You're hoping that human creativity will keep you one step ahead of biological adaptation.
Right. Well, you're also in an interdependent web with all of the manufacturers that you're dependent on as well,
Yeah,
right?
become,
and they're cutting they're nibbling away at your profit margin, which of course they have to do as well to survive.
Sure.
But right. Okay. So your dad and your dad was an accountant and your mom was a
school teacher.
Okay, so they don't know anything about farming.
Oh, yeah, they do. We actually,
okay.
Dad flew in the Navy in World War II, and on GI Bill went to Indiana University, got his degree in economics. He met Mom there, and then he had a dream of farming. His dad never farmed full time, but he wanted to farm. Well, I'm a Midwestern boy, no money, no land. How do I farm? And at that time, this was 1940s, and he saw, Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand. There was a lot of socialism going on in America there, World War II-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'm going to go to a developing country. It's a really free market, small government. We can do what we want. So he got on with Texas Oil Company as a bilingual accountant to Venezuela. And in 7 years was able to save enough money to buy a 1,000-acre farm in the highlands of Venezuela. We started raising chickens.
1,000 acres.
1,000 acres.
Mm-hmm.
Started raising chickens. And because our chickens were so clean, immediately he took over the local chicken market. You know how those Latin America, all the farmers come in with their wares and the middlemen, this is 1950s. And so he quickly took over the chicken market because the indigenous chickens they had snot, they had a nasal, they were running in open sewers and things like that. And of course, all the farmers accused us of witchcraft and voodoo and that. And so when there was a junta.
I thought witchcraft generally made sick chickens, not healthy ones.
Well, it's amazing what you can come up with when you're looking for an excuse. So then in 1959 there was the junta of Peterson there, and when you have anarchy like that, it allows scores to be settled.
Yeah, absolutely.
That wouldn't be otherwise settled under normal times, and so this gave a way for people to to develop their to run us out, if you will.
Yeah.
And basically the machine guns came in the front door, we went out the back door, and we spent another 8 months. Dad met with every minister, the Secretary of Interior, Agriculture, Treasury, trying to get protection. And nobody would, it was all bribe. How much you pay me, or they were scared they'd be assassinated. And so the only thing to do was Dad was there 12 years, loved the culture, loved the country, and loved the language, loved the people. But we couldn't stay with no protection like that. So we came back to the States Easter Sunday, 1961.
Now, when were you born?
So I was born in 1957.
So were you ever in Venezuela?
Yeah.
You were there too. Do you have any memories of it at all?
Toward the end, yes. There's a big difference between being 3 years old and 4 years old.
Yeah.
And so I don't remember the farm, but I remember Caracas. Of course, I spoke Spanish, as well as English, and I remember some of that trauma at the end, like Dad turning the car around and running away from guerrillas and things like that.
Right.
And so there was some trauma there.
So that was your encounter with socialism.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Fun.
Yes.
So then your family moved to the States and bought this.
We came back to the States, and Dad was 39, lost everything. And I remember when I hit 39 thinking, if I lost it all, would I start over? And he went way up in my my respect and honor at that point. And so we did. But the reason that we didn't go back to the Midwest, where both he and Mom were from and had family, was because he was still hoping to go back to Venezuela. He was hoping that when things settled, we'd get a call from the ambassador, and by being that close to D.C., we could run up there in hours, sign paperwork, and be back to the farm in Venezuela.
I see.
That was his.
So this was an interim plan.
This was an interim plan, and it ended up not being an interim plan.
So he bought 100 acres that were open and 450 woodland.
Yeah.
So let's let everybody listening and watching know about farm size. So compared to traditional farms, let's say of the 1920s, and compared to modern farms, how does the farm that your father purchased, how is it configured in terms of size, of comparative size?
It would be an average size farm for that area. 150 acres of open land, usable land with a wood lot. Compared to most farms, it had a much bigger wood lot. Being 450 acres, that's a lot of wood.
Any commercial utility in the wood?
Oh yeah. This is Appalachian hardwoods. This is oak and black walnut and poplar, and there's some good timber there. It had been timbered though. It had been all timbered, so it was primarily newer growth. It wasn't large. It wasn't large trees, and so there was really not much value there. There was some, but not a lot of value.
And how much of the land, you talked about the gullies and the rock and the fact there was very little vegetation, how much of the 100 open acres was damaged in that way? You implied that all of it.
All of it was poor. Some of it was poorer than others. It wasn't all rock, for sure. The shale lies it lies like this in the ground, and so you can go down 3 feet here, and then here you're on rock, and then 3 feet here, and you're on. It's layers. It kind of lays in there like that. So that's the way the land was. But Dad was such a visionary, and so when we realized the advice from the system is not acceptable.
And why did he think that exactly? Lots of people do take that route, and some people make it profitable. And so why had he decide what was the alternative route precisely, and why did he decide to take that, especially back then?
Right. Well, he had a tremendous conservation ethic, and these gullies he knew.
Oh, I see.
We couldn't plant corn. There wasn't enough. That's why we had gullies,
Right. So he could see that it had been mismanaged.
Right.
And
you could tell that it had been very mismanaged. So we started a very aggressive tree planting campaign. We planted about 60 acres in trees over those first 10 years. So we actually shrunk some of the open land, and we put brush down in the gullies and then he started experimenting.
That was to stabilize the soil against erosion?
So to at least stop the erosion. And one of my most poignant childhood memories was one Sunday. He said, "Let's take." I met this guy. I want to go see him. So we got in the car on a Sunday afternoon, took this drive, and I don't remember what the guy had. I don't remember whether he had sheep or chickens or pigs or whatever he had. All I remember was coming home. I was, maybe 6 or 7. I remember coming home and Dad just literally levitating as he drove the car. This guy had portable animal shelters. And Dad had never seen anything like that before. And it clicked in his head, wow, portable animal shelters. Suddenly I don't have to build stationary. I don't have to build a barn. I can build mobile infrastructure. And because he'd already gotten onto this moving animals around, Andre Voisin, he was a Frenchman who wrote Grass Productivity, kind of still the Bible of rotational or controlled grazing, and where you mimic native choreography, where the animals migrate, they move around.
Right.
And so, we don't have wolves, and they won't let us do fire very much. But we do have electric fence. Electric fence was just coming in. This is the early 60s. And so Dad actually invented a portable electric fencing system to where we could start moving the cows around. And we moved them, once every 10 days or so, and gradually got better and better and better until by the time I was a teenager, we were moving them, every 3 or 4 days. Then when I was in college, I put in our basic permanent grid so we could move them every day. And that was a quantum leap. That moved us. When we started moving them every day, everything started to kick in.
What if I told you there's a tiny nutrient missing from your body that could potentially change everything about how you feel? Well, if you've ever wondered why you're feeling sluggish, sleeping poorly, or aging faster than you'd like, the answer might be simpler than you think. That's where Fatty 15 comes in. Our cells need essential nutrients to stay healthy, and most of us are deficient in one critical one, C15. Fatty 15 is a science-backed, award-winning, pure, vegan-friendly C15 supplement with just one ingredient, and it has 3 times more cellular benefits than omega-3 or fish oil. Plus, it's free from flavors, allergens, and preservatives. C15 is the only ingredient in Fatty 15, 100% pure. And unlike fish oil supplements that oxidize quickly, Fatty 15 naturally resists breakdowns both in bottle and in your body. Fatty 15 works by replenishing your cells with C15, which repairs cellular damage, boosts energy production, and activates your body's natural repair mechanism for better sleep, mood, metabolism, and heart health. Plus, it comes in a beautiful, reusable glass and bamboo jar with eco-friendly refills delivered quarterly. Fatty 15 is on a mission to replenish the C15 levels in your body and restore your long-term health. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/Peterson. Fatty 15, essential nutrition for healthier cells and a healthier you.
Okay, so walk us through that. So a typical farm would have a fenced-off area, and the cattle will graze there. And the problem with that is they'll graze the vegetation right down to the ground, and then that's not good. Right. And so hypothetically, if you imagine a huge circle, you could rotate them around the circle at some speed, and they wouldn't be able to graze at some of it, and that it would grow in behind them. And
That's right.
Then their waste products would also fertilize the land, and the grass would be stabilized against erosion.
Yeah.
Right. And so, okay, so now you said you'd experimented with 10 days and then 4 and then 1.
And gradually got it down to where.
Okay, so how do you build the electric fences, and how do they move?
Yeah. So the thing you have to understand from an ecology standpoint is if we had a graph and we charted the way vegetation grows, it grows in a sigmoid curve. It's just like a person. They start small, little baby, and then they hit teenage years and they grow real fast, and then they quit growing and eventually go into senescence. Mm-hmm. So I call this diaper grass, teenage grass, and nursing home grass. Okay, just to help. And so if you want to accumulate the most biomass possible, you want to let it go through that blaze of growth. So the whole idea of
that's when the cows come in.
Controlled grazing is to hit it at the second break point, not this break point, not this point down here, when it's long enough to graze, but it hasn't gone through this teenage growth spurt. Uh-huh. So that's what the electric fence becomes. Then a steering wheel, an accelerator, and a brake on the four-legged sauerkraut pruner to be able to steer them around the landscape to catch this second growth point all the time. And suddenly, what happens is, by letting the grass go through there, you get a completely different energy flow, because now the grass is always at energy equilibrium. It's not.
What do you mean by energy equilibrium?
What I mean is when the forage gets pruned or grazed, I use the word pruning because grazing is that's a bad word.
Okay.
So pruning, all right. When it gets pruned, if it gets pruned too frequently, you actually weaken the plant. Mm-hmm. And so by controlling when the pruner can prune strategically, you allow that plant to actually accumulate energy and vibrancy and flourish, just like pruning a vineyard or an apple tree or anything else. And so, for example, in our area, the average grass...
Right, so the optimal amount of grazing in a grassland is not 0.
No. So rather than grazing 20 times this long, we're grazing 6 times this long, for example. And and so in our county, for example, the average cow days per acre, so a cow day is what one cow will eat in a day. All right, that's a cow day. And in our county, the average is 80 cow days per acre. So an acre will support 80 cows for 1 day a year, or 1 cow for 80 days a year. We're averaging almost 400. And we started with gullies and rocks and never planted a
400. So 5 times the efficiency.
Right.
Because you're allowing them to graze when they're after the
because we're
maximum
allowing
productivity level.
that forage.
Why doesn't everybody do that? If there's 5 times the efficiency gain, it seems self-evident.
Because they think it's too hard to move cows.
Yeah, well, fair enough. They're big,
and they think it's too hard to move cows. Well, we have 1,000 head, so we're not a backyard operation by any means. But most people, because it's new.
Yeah.
It's just different. It's new. It's not what Grandpa did.
Yeah,
and
fair
you got to
enough.
realize that with America's average farmer being 60 years old,
right.
the average farmer is still in Grandpa's paradigm.
Right.
When land was cheap, fuel was cheap, and it's still in this 1950s paradigm. When we talk about
The average farmer's 60.
is 60 years old, which means in the next 15 years, half of all America's agriculture equity is going to change hands. Land,
Right, so that means
land,
there's a time
buildings, and
for
machinery.
potential transformation there.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
or catastrophic failure.
Yes, yes. And that level of agrarian equity transfer has never happened that fast in any civilization in history except in conquest. The Huns come over and run over Rome or whatever.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying we're getting ready to have conquest. I am suggesting that we're in a guinea pig time here if we can pull this off at peace and have this level of transfer. So obviously the question is, well, who's going to control this land in 15 years? Is it BlackRock? Is it Bill Gates? Is it the Chinese? Is it, what is it? And that's why I'm a bit on a tear to try to germinate young farmers,
So to speak.
yeah, young farmers to jump on this, because I think we're in an unprecedented time of opportunity
Right.
in farming, because so much is going to become available.
Okay, so now you have this land, it's all full of gullies, it's not doing very well. You start planting trees to rehabilitate it. What do you do about the gullies? How do you get grassland to grow? How do you introduce the cows? And then tell me more about the electric fencing and how you learn to move the cattle.
Yeah, so some of the gullies were on gentle land, pasture land, and those we actually built ponds in low ground and hauled the silt, all that silt that had accumulated down in the valley. We hauled it up and actually literally filled in those ditches, with taking the silt that had washed down. A lot of the real steep.
Now you built ponds where you took the silt out of?
Yes. So
Okay.
so now.
So the erosion had washed the soil, and you found where that had washed to.
And we actually found 100-year-old fence posts buried 10 feet under silt. Okay.
And you trucked that?
Yes.
And what trucks and
with
what
a-
front end loaders?
A track loader, and a couple dump trucks, and I mean you're just running it whatever 200 yards. I mean it's close. Boom, 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 and
So you're flattening everything back out.
so we're filling in those gullies.
Are you filling it in with? Do you fill it in with filler first and then topsoil? What?
You just fill it in with the material you're digging to build a pond.
I see.
So you're just digging out.
Okay,
digging
so it's
out
relatively straightforward if you
Yeah.
have the machinery.
Yeah, that's
and you
right.
had enough capital for the machinery.
Well, we hired an excavator.
Yeah.
But that wasn't done early. That was done much later. We just started moving animals around and
On the land you had.
and the choreography of moving them around itself was a tremendous healer. And I watched over my lifetime these big quarter-acre saucers of bare rock, just like a scab on your hand. It heals from the outside in, doesn't heal from the inside out. It heals from the outside in. It gets smaller and smaller, and finally that last little, and you pull it off in your new skin. That's exactly the way the soil was on these barren places. Every year, 18 inches, the soil would come up on the edge, 18 inches, till eventually the rocks were not there. Today,
Okay, and so why did it come back exactly?
because vegetation, decomposing, if you can get enough decomposing vegetation, that builds soil.
Right.
That's how you
So
build
blow,
soil.
like there'd be
And-
dead
and-
leaves
and
blow
so-
along the edges
right.
and collect.
And so by letting the grass grow to this second point where we're getting this, Voisin called it the blaze of growth period all the time, we were getting more root structure, more biomass, more manure from the animals themselves.
So the plants will colonize the rocks,
Yes,
essentially.
the plants, absolutely. And so today, all those areas that when I was a kid, it was bare rock, today has, 16 inches of soil on it.
Okay, now I wanted to ask you specifically about that too, because we hear a lot of noise about how cows are contributing to global warming, which is an idea that's really struck me as rather specious right from the beginning. Because like the buffalo did that too. Like I see, so huge herds of grazing animals are bad for the planet. That strikes me as highly unlikely. So, and I know they talk about methane, but people talk about a lot of things. Now, you said that you regenerated the ground with the cattle and with the careful management of grass, and now you're producing, say, a foot of topsoil on top of this rock. I presume that's also a carbon sink.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Right, because plants take in carbon because they're like made out of carbon. And
right. In fact, when you want to look at that, in 1961, the first soil test that we took, we averaged about 1% organic matter. Organic matter is a kissing cousin to carbon. Organic matter is something is
right, because carbon is life-based. Life is carbon-based.
Yeah, right. And so organic matter is something that was living at one time, and now it's in some state of decomposition in the soil. It's what gives soil its porosity, its bounce, its
it's what segregates it from sand or dust.
Yes, or even clay.
Right.
And so 1%. Today, we're a little over 8%. So all it would take, if you want to talk climate change, atmospheric carbon, all it would take is all of our farmland to change 1% in organic matter, and we would return to pre-1960 atmospheric carbon levels.
During this holy season, I'd like us to take a moment to think about something amazing. You. Psalms tells us that God carefully knit you together in your mother's womb. He saw who you were meant to be before you even existed. At Preborn Ministries, they believe each person is made in God's image and that all life is sacred and eternal. Maybe not all pregnancies are planned, but that's okay. Whether they're planned or not, all life has incredible value, and God has a purpose for everyone each day they're here. Today, I invite you to thank God for the gift of life and to remember the babies still in their mother's womb. Their lives matter too. Last year alone, Preborn's network of clinics helped save over 67,000 babies from abortion. Your tax-deductible donation of $28 sponsors one ultrasound, which doubles a baby's chance at life. How many lives can you help save today? To donate, just dial pound 250 and say baby, or visit preborn.com/Jordan today. Again, to make a donation and sponsor one ultrasound, visit preborn.com/Jordan. Thank you for supporting this life-saving work.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's really struck me as incomprehensible about the carbon debate is, so I know, for example, that over the last 30 years, something like that, the planet has greened quite radically, especially in semi-arid areas. And that seems to be a consequence of increased atmospheric carbon dioxide, some of which is arguably human-made. But the net consequence of that, it's so interesting to see, is immense greening.
Sure.
It's something like 20% of the Earth's area, which is like, that's a lot. And the fact that it's in semi-arid areas means that exactly the desert-like areas that were supposed to expand, according to the climate doomsayers, have actually shrunk. And I've been thinking that through, again, more recently, I talked to Patrick Moore, for example, and he was one of the founders of Greenpeace. And
Right.
Moore has produced these, he's not the only one, but he's produced these graphs of carbon dioxide levels across like 500 million years instead of 250.
Right.
And we're definitely at a carbon dioxide low.
Yeah.
And so if we tap it up even a little bit, it makes a big difference. But that's all to say that plants like carbon dioxide a lot.
They do.
And then when there's more of it, they grow and sequester it, and they do that rapidly. And then I read a paper here recently that indicated that the typical climate model underestimates the rapidity at which plants utilize carbon dioxide by 30%, which is like a fairly large margin of error. And so it just seems to me to be self-evident that if we set the preconditions, plants would mop up any excess carbon dioxide in like no time flat. And so you're saying that if we improved even our grazing habits so that grass was allowed to grow longer before it was grazed on, you don't need much of a percentage in how effective the plants sequester carbon to take whatever excess carbon there is.
That's exactly right. And as pastures, as perennials, and of course, a lot of North America was a prairie. Okay, that's a perennial prairie, as opposed to an annual, which is corn,
crops,
and soybeans, and crop. Okay, annual crop. Okay, in a healthy perennial.
So you don't have to plant perennials; they just grow year after year.
That's right. That's right. So in a perennial prairie situation, pasture situation, if it's healthy, there's enough methanotrophic bacteria. This is a special kind of freestanding bacteria, methanotrophic bacteria, and like its name suggests, it's there to pull down methane. There's enough there to metabolize into the soil bank the methane released from 1,000 cows per acre. Well, you're never going to have 1,000 cows per acre. So
where do these ideas come from then? Given because we hear follow the science all the time, but then if you look into the science, first of all, there's a plethora of opinions, right, at minimum, and just now and then, when you're looking at data, you kind of have to stand back and use your head a bit, and you start from maybe the presumption that any idea that large grazing herds are bad for the planet is to be regarded with extreme skepticism to begin with, because large grazing herds are exactly the sorts of things that the environmental types worship when they're happening naturally in Africa. So you can't have it both ways.
That's right.
And so I've just always thought the idea that pastured animals, properly pastured, being bad for the planet somehow, and that's as bad as equating factory farming with regenerative farming, for example, because they're not the same thing at all.
No,
okay, so your experience on the farm was that carefully managed grazing herds regenerated soil that, well, not even soil, they actually made rocky areas into soil that could then be, well, first of all, a carbon sink, if you care about such things, but also productive grazing land.
Yes.
And a big part of the trick there is to manage the grass properly and to move the cattle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we began adding the other species. So you've got the cattle, and so we look around. So Jordan, a lot of what developed here was in the mid '60s. Dad looked around and he said, "Well, 10-10-10 chemical fertilizer doesn't build soil. All right, what does build soil? What makes regeneration happen?" And it's very simple. There is no animalless ecology, so you got to have animals. Well, what about these animals? Well, they move. Well, if they move, then we have to give them shelter, water, and control. And so all of our innovations that we're now famous for grew out of not. We didn't sit around in a focus group saying, how can we innovate? It was strictly, how does nature work? So how do we mimic that on a domestic scale? That was all. We don't have.
So you're basically mimicking migration.
Mimicking the choreography. We call this mob stocking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon, sequestration, fertilization. And I knew you would enjoy that.
Yeah. Say that again.
And I did practice that in front of a mirror.
Okay, let's hear it again.
Mob stocking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon, sequestration.
Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Right. Well, that sounds plenty scientific.
Plenty scientific.
Yeah.
So then we say, well, how does this maintain sanitation? You got all this manure and urine and stuff. And well, birds follow herbivores. So we built eggmobiles for laying chickens, and they follow the cow herd. The chickens scratch through the cow pies, eat out the fly larvae, scratch the cow patties into the ground, stimulating the fertility, eating the grasshoppers and crickets that compete with the cows for the vegetation. And instead of where most farmers would shoot.
So the chickens chase the cows. Are they moved too?
Yes. So they're in eggmobiles. That's what we call them, eggmobiles.
Okay. So the chickens follow the cattle, and you move the chickens as well.
Yeah. So like the egret on the rhino's nose. I mean, look at any herd, wildebeest in nature, and you'll see these flocks of birds following, and they're the sanitizers with the herbivores. So instead of shooting the cows up with parasiticides and grubicides and things like that, we just collect $100,000 worth of eggs as a byproduct of the pasture sanitation program and the fertility program. So this then allows...
So why sanitation exactly? Delve into that a bit more, because while the cows are manuring the land as they graze, and the sanitation problem, it doesn't decompose rapidly enough without the birds. Like what exact role do the birds play?
I mean, there are dung beetles, but the sanitation is that the manure is what carries the cattle parasites. That's where the parasites live and propagate to reinfect the cows when they come back through. So when the cows scatter them, the sun and now not having enough of a pie to procreate in,
right,
to live in.
I see.
Then they don't live for another day.
So you move the cattle for two reasons then, actually. One is to allow the grass to maximize in terms of density, but also to allow the land to clean.
Yes.
So that when the cows come back, they're eating grass, right? Rather than their own waste products.
That's right.
And the chickens help with that. And then you collect the eggs. Okay, so now the problem comes down to essentially how do you move the cattle, right?
So we move the... we move the cows every day around 4 o'clock. We like the afternoon move best for a number of reasons. But it's electric fence, one strand of electric fence. Cows are very smart. They don't want to get shocked. And so we just go out and open a cross fence. So imagine a ladder with rungs. And so our permanent wires, our permanent fence is the stringers on the outside. Our portables are the rungs on the inside, and we can expand and contract those based on how big the herd is, how much grass there is, all sorts of factors as to how much we're going to give them.
So let's get an idea of let's say we have a field, and you want to move the cows. What do you have that's permanent, that's fencing exactly?
Well, the edges define, like, between the field and the forest, or the field and a creek, field and a pond. All right, so you
so that's permanently fenced off.
That's permanent.
Okay,
and then you simply run. You got a little reel, with poly wire on it, and you run that across from side to side, and that
demarcates
an area, and you're simply giving those cows a segment of that. We call it a paddock.
Yeah.
Every day, and the beauty is that in no time, the cows respond to you coming. I mean, think about your dog or your cat. When you bang the dish, they come running. They know what that is. Well, the cows, when we go out to move them, roughly, we try to do it as close to 4 as possible. Mm-hmm. If you got called every day at 4 o'clock for a bowl of ice cream, about 3:45, your tail would wag and your ears would wiggle too. And so the cows are ready. And we go out and we just call them, "Come on, cows!" And they just come running through. We close behind them.
Why do they? Because they know the food will be better.
Because they've got a new salad bar.
Okay, so they've got
a new salad bar.
Learned that,
yeah,
and then
it doesn't take them long to learn that. They learn that very, very quickly. And so they just so you don't have to herd them. You don't.
Another advantage to doing it at the same time every day, because you establish a habit.
Animals love routine. Animals love routine.
So do people, as it turns out.
Yes,
even though they think they don't.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, we are creatures of routine. So the moving them, but you have to understand.
So why do you need the fences at all then? Mm-hmm. Why do you need the fences at all? mean, it stops them from going back. It
stops them from going into
forward.
tomorrow's dinner. So basically, we're giving them 1 day's plate of menu every day.
Right.
One plate full. If somebody came and gave you, 5 platefuls of food for 5 days, you'd probably just pick out the good stuff and leave the stuff you didn't want, and you'd be a lot more
right. So they have enough,
so
they eat
have
efficiently
enough.
then.
Yeah, and they actually change their behavior to eat more aggressively and with less prejudice on the liver and onions, if you will. And so this actually is healthy for the cows to actually increase their palatability index to eat things that they wouldn't. So they'll eat thistles and they'll eat all sorts of things that are actually good for them that they wouldn't eat
if they had more choice.
If they had if they had all the choice.
So how did you figure out what to plant as well? I mean,
we never planted anything.
Oh, so this is
this is natural seed bank. Whatever's there grows, and so So the management affects the type of vegetation you have.
Okay, so how did that get started then? I mean, because we were talking about the gullies and the rocks.
Because there's a seed bank.
Already in nature.
There's a seed bank in nature. It comes in on bird wings, deer hide, possums waddle across. The ability of nature to spread seeds is almost incomprehensible.
Right.
It's almost incomprehensible.
Of course. Well, all the plants that weren't good at that don't exist. Right. So that's crucial.
So the seed bank.
So the seeds will come all by themselves.
Yeah. So the key is for us to create a habitat that will allow as many different kinds of plants to flourish as possible. And so that's what revegetated these fields
and why as many different kinds of plants as possible?
Because each one of them creates a different enzyme, a different they
makes it more resilient too.
Some have spreader roots, some have tap roots, some like sun, some like shade. And
so they take advantage of all the available sun and resources if you have a diversity of plants.
And not only that, but the research being done by the Bionutrient Food Association right now, they're 2 years into this beef study. It's being done at the University of Utah, the lab, and they're measuring 150 different nutrients in beef, and what makes one have more than the other. What makes beef different nutritively. And interestingly, there's no difference in organic. There's no difference in breed. No difference in age. The only metric that makes a big difference in the amount of riboflavin, the amount of niacin, whatever, 150 nutrients. The only thing that makes a big difference is how many different types of plants did the animal eat.
Right. So that means, so that's so cool because that means that you can...
So the diversity.
Right. So you can maximize for biodiversity at the plant level.
Yes.
And that means that you have a mix of plants that can take advantage of different kinds of soil and different growing conditions.
Yes.
And your pasture is resilient because there's multiple species. And so some will grow better in dry years and some will grow better in wet years and cold versus warm. And so your plants are resilient, and then the animals, because they have a varied diet, can derive from that variation the balance of nutrients that will make them grow best and be healthy, and that makes them that gives them a higher nutritional value.
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's a good deal, and you don't have to plant. Okay, well, let's go back to the planting idea just for a minute. I mean, are there ways that you could augment the productive quality of your pasturing by doing some planting, or is it just better to leave it natural?
Jury's out on that. I mean, there are certainly people who have planted things in their fields. In general, if I'm going to convert, for example, a cornfield into pasture, I'm going to plant. I don't have time. I don't have
time to wait.
I don't have time to wait. In 20 years, yes, it'll be a pasture, but I don't want to wait 20 years.
Right.
So in that case, I would certainly plant.
You would plant what? Alfalfa, maybe? What do you plant?
No, I would plant a cocktail.
Okay.
2 clovers, 3 grasses, some plantains, some.
You
some
just
forbs.
sprinkle that together?
Yeah.
I see. So you'd make an artificial diverse plant.
Artificial cocktail.
pasture.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it'll gradually diversify, over time.
Shopify powers millions of businesses worldwide, supporting everyone from established brands to entrepreneurs just starting their journey. You can create your professional storefront effortlessly with Shopify's extensive library of customizable templates designed to reflect your brand's unique identity. Boost your productivity with Shopify's AI-powered tools that craft compelling products, descriptions, engaging headlines, and even enhance your product's photography, all with just a few clicks. Plus, you can market your business like a pro without hiring a team. Easily develop and launch targeted email campaigns and social media content that reaches customers wherever they spend their time, online or offline. If that's not enough, Shopify offers expert guidance on every aspect of commerce, from inventory management to international shipping logistics to seamless return processing. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period and start selling today at shopify.com/JBP. Go to shopify.com/JBP. Again, that's shopify.com/JBP.
Okay, how does the dollar return on your cattle, say, compare to what you could make while using the land for other purposes? If you had a monoculture, for example, if you planted corn, I'm very curious about the economics of this, because farming is famously a very low margin, high labor enterprise, very difficult enterprise. And so there's a variety of things you can do with land. And obviously many people plant massive monocultures and they use chemicals and they use chemical herbicides. And I'm not a priori critiquing that. You decided to go with cattle and chickens. And what else do you raise?
More than that, we went 2 things. One, we went multi-species. So we have cows, chickens, both meat and eggs, pigs, lamb, rabbit, duck. So multi-species.
Okay.
All right.
That's for the ponds, the ducks, I presume.
Yeah. Well, it's for eggs and meat. That's a small. We won't do a lot of those. Our main is beef, pork, and chicken. That's our main.
Sure.
That's our main thing. Rabbit, duck, lamb. Those are all kind of peripheral things. But the other part of this is that we elected to direct market.
Yeah. Okay.
And so remember, Dad was an accountant, and he understood very early on that as a small farm, the commodity margin, the commodity business, the whole goal is to become the least cost producer.
Yeah. At high scale.
At high scale.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Right.
And as a small farm, he understood we can't compete at that. So I'm sure you've heard farmers say, well, the middleman makes all the money.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's typical for many enterprises.
Exactly. So he realized, well, in order for us to compete, to actually make a living on this small farm, we need to become a middleman.
Yeah.
We need to own that. So basically, the retail dollar is divided into producer, processor, marketer, distributor. Those 4 basic.
Say that again. Producer, farmers,
processor, marketer, and distributor.
Right. The marketer is the one who lets everybody know that the products exist, which is very important.
Yes.
And then the last one
is distributor.
Right. Of course.
So it's got to get to the retail interface somehow. Okay. So the retail dollars divided those 4 ways, and different commodities. There are different rate percentages in each of those 4 categories, but
and tremendous competition between them.
Yes, tremendous competition. The farmer, there's only one part of that is subject to what I call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which is weather, price, pestilence, and disease.
Right.
That's production.
Right. So he takes all the risks in the natural world. He takes all the
risks.
Yeah.
Whereas, when the grasshoppers come, they don't eat the tires on your delivery vehicle. When the drought comes, it doesn't eliminate your Wi-Fi connection to your customers. So these other 3, the processing, marketing, and distribution, are relatively immune from weather, price, pestilence,
Well, they're
and
also
disease.
not dependent on any single farmer.
That's right. That's right.
So their risk is distributed.
That's right. So we began when we headed into this. We established a direct marketing persona. Eventually became our brand, Polyface, Polyface, Polyface Farm, Farm of Many Faces. That became our brand, and we now sell to restaurants, institutions, boutique groceries. We ship nationwide. We have a farm store. We direct sell into about 35 drop points in the urban sector around Northern Virginia, D.C., Richmond, Virginia Beach, Williamsburg.
And those drop. Tell me about those. Are they
urban drop points?
Farmers markets or
no?
These are what?
We're not involved in any farmers markets.
Oh, you're not. So
and I'm not opposed to farmers markets.
Yeah.
But I just don't think, in general, they're not a very efficient interface because they're primarily social circles.
Yeah.
They're primarily social clubs.
Relatively low volume, I would presume. Too.
Yeah. It was because.
So they're like a boutique product.
Yeah, because most of the people who go are there to show their support of local food and assuage their guilt from taking their,
and have a nice day at the farmer's market.
And show off their newly coifed little poodle dog, that they had done.
Right.
And so they can only buy a little baby food jar with a pink ribbon on it of kimchi or some, special thing. They're not buying bushels of green beans or bushels of apples or things. And so we just found farmers markets a very inefficient retail
How did you build your
interface.
customer network?
So
that's work, man.
Yeah, it is. It is. We spend as much time marketing as we do the entire farm production.
Yeah, well, marketing's such a funny enterprise because people, first of all, it's not even named very well because what you're doing when you're a marketer, really what you are is a communicator and a network builder.
Yes.
And, people say things like, well, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. And that's a lie.
You're absolutely
It's just
right.
not true
Yeah.
because first of all, it isn't obvious they want a better mousetrap, and they're pretty set in their mousetrap habits. And plus, they don't know your damn mousetrap exists, and they actually don't care. And so, one of the things that shocked me when I started making consumer products, which was like 30 years ago, was, because I thought I'd invented this process with my colleagues that help people identify and hire more effective employees. And the first error I made was thinking that large companies actually cared about that, which they don't at all, which is quite a shock. They say they do, but they actually don't when it comes down to it. But more than that, I also realized that if you have something new, that's actually a risk and not an advantage because most people are so risk averse, they won't try anything new. They want to know that many other people are using this and haven't died because of it. And then no one knows your damn product exists. And so I would say for the average enterprise, you tell me what you think about this with regard to your enterprise, the product is 5% of the problem and communication about the product is 90% of the problem. I know that leaves 5% for noise, but it's exactly the opposite of what most people would think.
That's
Marketing is communication and it really matters. So you guys figured that out.
Messaging is everything. So, and the messaging always has to be in terms of the possible buyer.
Right.
In other words, it's not about you.
No, not at all.
It's about their need.
Yeah.
Describing their need.
What's their problem?
What's their need? What can I fix for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a hard thing when I'm not like my normal consumer.
Right, definitely.
I have a big garden. I walk out the back door. I've got eggs. I've got cows. I've got
so you don't even exist in the landscape where the problem.
Exactly. So for me, I almost have to get into some sort of a yin position or something to okay.
How do I think when I don't have these things?
How do I think like my consumer, like my customer
Very
thinks?
difficult, yeah.
Very, very difficult. But when you can get into that position, you can absolutely message it.
Okay, well, tell me how you guys did that. And I'd like to know more about the details of your network. You talked about many inroads for sales.
So remember when we started, so I came back to the farm full time September 24, 1982. Okay, 1982. I left. I was a reporter, an investigative reporter at the local newspaper for 2.5 years after college. So so here now I'm wanting to come back to the farm full time. And now I'm working in town, trying to, how do I come back to the farm full time? Teresa and I got married. We remodeled the attic of the old farmhouse. We didn't call it the attic; we called it our penthouse. And we lived we drove a $50 car, lived on $300 a month. And within 2 years, we were able to save enough that we could live for 1 year without an income. And so September 24, 1982, I walked out of the office. I didn't think we'd make it.
Why the hell was your wife on board with this? Like, why did she think?
Because I married the greatest gal in the world, man. I mean, she is the ultimate home economist. She cans 800 quarts of stuff a summer. She can sew clothes, make.
I see. She was interested in doing all of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she thought I was pretty sharp.
No, but you were working
I think she still does.
You were working as a reporter, and she was working as what?
Well, we had Daniel, so she worked at a fabric store for a little bit, clerking, but Daniel came very early, and so she stayed at home, and I'm working at the newspaper.
Okay, but both of you wanted to go have a farm life.
Oh yeah.
Why did she want that? I mean, did she come from a farming background?
She wanted to be with me.
Okay. Oh well, fair enough.
I mean, is that fair enough?
But did she come back? Yeah, but still,
she grew up on a farm.
Okay. So she had some familiarity with that.
Yeah.
Okay, and she'd bought into the idea that you had put forward, and she was enthusiastic about, because that's important. I mean, you want your wife to be seriously on board with this. This is hard work.
The single biggest reason farms fail is contradictory visions of husband and wife.
Well, that's probably the biggest reason marriage fails, all things considered. But I can see it being particularly acute with a project like this, because it's all consuming.
You don't go to work every day. You're with each other.
Yeah.
And so those that.
And you've got the four horsemen of the apocalypse nipping at your heels all the time.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So I came back to the farm full time. Now I'm there.
82, right?
In 82. And it took us 3 years, Jordan, until we could. So I say, we could exhale. I think we're going to make it. It took us 3 years.
Yeah.
But that little.
Well, that's not too bad to start a new business.
No, that's right.
I mean,
that's right.
A lot of new businesses fail. And the first part of it, when you're not making any money and you've got no network.
That's right.
What do they say? Getting from 0 to 1, that's very hard.
That's right.
1 to 2 is still hard. 2 to 3 is getting a little better.
Yeah. But 10 to 11 is a lot easier.
Yeah, right.
So what I did at that time, fortunately, I was blessed with and have been blessed with a bit of a gift of gab communication. I'm an extrovert. And in high school, college, I did interscholastic, intercollegiate debate. I've got a room full of debate trophies, and did theater, drama, plays, public speaking, all that. I didn't do the athletic thing. I was not. I was a late bloomer. The best thing that ever happened to me was getting cut from the 7th grade basketball team. My mother was a health and phys ed teacher, so she was extremely athletic. My older brother was very athletic, and here I come along. Well, I've got to be athletic, right? I know, you got to join the family brand after all. And so I'm a pudgy, 14-year-old, late bloomer. And I get cut from the 7th grade baseball team. I get cut from the 8th grade basketball team. In other words, I don't make the teams. I'm on the team and get cut. I mean, I didn't even make the tryouts. Okay, didn't make it. And I remember like yesterday in 8th grade, looking and not seeing my name on that roster, and making a mental decision. Okay, athletics is done. I'm a great communicator. I win spelling bees. I win speaking contests. I'm going to put all my attention on that. So I tell kids, I say, you be thankful for what you fail at early, because that helps you determine your path in life.
I want to tell you all why my team and I founded Peterson Academy. First, it's because the technology is there. It's now possible to identify and gather the greatest lecturers and thinkers alive today, and to put them in a position where they can offer their best to all who are interested. Second, advanced education is far more expensive than necessary. Students who complete a 4-year degree risk crippling themselves with debt just when they're starting their lives and their careers. Third reason, because of ideological and institutional corruption. I watched that process painfully unfold for 40 years at McGill, at Harvard, at the University of Toronto. What's the alternative at Peterson Academy? Well, we have 40 stellar professors on board. We have 34 8-hour courses taught at the highest level of quality and with maximum efficiency. And there's much more to come. Find your purpose, sharpen your wit, and bring to bear on your own life the knowledge being offered to you by the best in the world. Go to petersonacademy.com for the details. Enroll and change your life. Well, there's another issue there that you're highlighting that's extremely relevant with regard to our discussion of marketing. It's like one of the things that people don't understand, and this might be more true of people who, like, let's say, have an interest in practical matters like trades or even engineering. It's like, well, why do I need to be fluent in my communication? Why do I need to write? Why do I need to learn to speak? It's like, well, if 75% of your business problem is communication, and it certainly is.
Yes.
Right? What are you selling? What do you have to offer? How do you talk to people so you find out what
for
they
your
need?
employees?
Yeah, that's right. How do you negotiate? How do you make contracts? All of that. It's like there isn't anything more worthwhile than you can learn to do than how to get command of the language. And that's so interesting in your situation because you might think, well, that might be true except for farming. Now, I know you shouldn't think that, but it's just not true.
No.
Because communication is so crucial.
The people who communicate lead their professions.
Right.
Across the board. Across the board.
Exactly.
And I have moms come up to me with their little, 10-year-old in tow. My son wants to be a farmer, or daughter wants to be a farmer. What would you suggest to them? I say, find your local amateur theater group, enroll them.
Right.
Get them.
So counterintuitive.
Yes,
eh?
and they look at me like, yeah. I say, become a storyteller.
Yeah.
Become a storytellers are what changed the world.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right.
And so we obviously 82. This is before computers, before internet, any of this stuff. And so we basically did a 3-prong approach. I put together a slide program. The old Kodak carousel. A slide projector.
Yeah.
And at that time, every city had a very vibrant kind of philanthropic. Rotary Club, Ruritan, Kiwanis.
Elks,
Toastmasters, Elks, Moose, right? All these, and they do weekly or monthly dinner meetings, and they're always looking for an interesting program. And so I put together a carousel program, how we can heal the planet with pasture-based livestock, and it was the beginning of this.
This was when did you do this?
In 82.
Oh yeah, so okay.
All right. So this was just the beginning. Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings were just beginning to once in a while put in a tidbit about cow burps, and there was just the beginning of this kind of demonization of livestock. And so anyway, I put this together, and at the end I would say, now if you'd like to participate in this, I'll be glad to add your name to our customer list. You'll get a newsletter and order blank, and we can, and each one of those would yield 2, 3, 4 people. So that was one thing I did. The second thing
so that's also something that we shouldn't skip over lightly. So I think the most valuable guy, I have millions of social media followers, and I don't know how many, 20 million, lots.
Right.
The most valuable of all the things we own are our mailing lists. And I think, I don't know what my mailing list has on it, 350,000 people, something like that, which is a pretty small fraction of the total social media network. But it's by far, like if we're trying to advertise for tickets for a lecture. So you're going out there and you're collecting individual people who are interested. Like how many people interested in what you're doing? How many people like that did you need before you were successful? How many did you have to collect?
Fortunately, at that time, we, with our low expenses and all that, we didn't need more than, 100 families, 100, 200 families.
Okay. So that's really worth knowing. So you put together this slide presentation and you collected 150 avid customers.
Yes. And if you've got 100 people that are spending $1,000 a year with you, that's significant.
Right.
And so that's...
Especially if they're loyal and they had also talked to other people.
Yes.
Because word of mouth really matters.
Okay, so the next thing we did was, when somebody would call us and say, hey, I heard about you. I want your stuff. You're tempted to say, oh, good. Well, what do you want? You want 5 chickens and 3 T-bone steaks. My first question was, oh, where did you hear about us? Where did you hear about us? Oh, I had dinner over at Mary Jane's.
Yeah.
And so then I'd go to the customer box and I'd put a Post-it note at Mary Jane's to remind me the next time Mary Jane came out and picked up something. Mary Jane, thank you. I just hug her, slobber all over her, say thank you for spreading the word.
Yeah.
And tell you what, go over and take a dozen eggs home with you for
absolutely.
free. And people are starved for appreciation. They're starved for love. They're starved for appreciation. They will jump off a cliff for you.
So you just said something like with both those that's unbelievably worth noting, because one of the things you can do in your family, well, even for yourself, to promote positive change that's unbelievably effective. I'll give you an example of this. So there's a famous psychologist, B.F. Skinner.
Yep.
And B.F. Skinner was the father of reinforcement learning theory. And that's a big deal. These large language models, these new AI systems, they're trained with reinforcement theory. So like this was a major deal. And B.F. Skinner was a master of this. And in World War II, he trained pigeons to guide missiles by pecking on photographs as they were flying across the sky, right? So Skinner could train animals to do anything. Now, he noted that you could use threat and punishment to shape an animal's behavior, but the best thing to use was targeted reward. And so what he would do is his animals were hungry because they had to be motivated to work for food pellets. And so he'd have a hungry animal. Maybe so imagine there's a rat in a cage and there's a little ladder and you want the rat to go up on the ladder and then walk across and go down the other side. It's pretty complicated behavior. So here's how Skinner would do it. He would just watch that rat, and as soon as it made a move near the ladder, he'd give it a food pellet. And then it would start hanging around the ladder. And when it was hanging around close to the bottom of the ladder, now and then it would put a paw up and he'd give it a food pellet. And then now the rat was doing this quite a bit, and then now and then it would do this, food pellet. And so but the key issue was that he was observing. And then when he got an increment of behavior in the direction he wanted, he signified that. Well, that's what you're doing with your customers, is you're paying very careful attention. And then one of your customers does something that you'd really like them to do more of. You notice, you tell them, you reward them for it. And then the other thing you said that was very cool was that people are dying for this. It's like, if you watch people, you'll see that they do some tentative good things kind of secretly. It's like they're hoping that someone will notice, but generally people don't. And so they'll do something good that's a little bit extra. They'll do this with their boss or with their wife. And generally people are kind of opaque to that. But if you notice that, you say, ha! With kids, you see this. With kids, you see, like, I see that you spent a little extra time, like, putting away your Legos today. And, like, you moved all those Legos from there to there. And that was really good. I'd like to see more of that. The kid is just like, if you can catch them in the act, man, they're so happy about that.
That's right.
And so so now you've got your 100 people who are on your side and you're watching them very carefully. And if they put in a good word for you, which they don't have to do, by the way, you want to say, we saw that, we appreciate it. Here's a little gift. Thank you very much. That's all. You don't have to say, please keep doing it. That's right. That gets that exchange going, right? And those person to person, like one of the things we're very careful on tour, for example, I mean, I see thousands of people, and my staff know this particularly. The rule for my staff is do not ever annoy any of the people who are interested in coming up to me or being at the shows. Because because if you annoy one person, they will tell 1,000 people. If you annoy 100 people enough so they start talking about it, you're done. Your business is done. I don't really care the scale.
Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about emotional equity. And he says it takes roughly 10 positives, 10 praises
to cancel out one,
to take one criticism.
I mean, that's probably an underestimate.
That's
well, and
powerful.
also people remember the negative.
We're hardwired to remember. Nobody comes back from town and says, honey, I hit 5 go lights. We hit stoplights. We never call them go lights, even though they let us go.
Right.
We never think about them letting us go. We think about them making us stop.
Yes, yes.
I did the slide program, kind of what I call infotainment.
Yeah, and the story is so important because you have an interesting story to tell.
Exactly, the story. And people, listen, people still love to feel like they're a part of a great cause,
of
a great
adventure.
thing. And so the whole theme here is you can participate in healing the planet, making vegetation, building soil, clean water, clean air. You can participate with what you eat. Here's how you do it. And so people they're drawn, they're attracted to this what? All of our little bags at the farm store, our little, slogan is healing the planet or healing the land one bite at a time. We're trying to connect what you're eating to the landscape.
Doing it.
And we're actually doing it. All right. So
it's an important detail as well.
Yeah. The thing I love most is when people come to visit the farm, we have a 24/7, 365 open door policy. Anyone can come from anywhere in the world to see anything, anytime, anywhere, unannounced. That's our dedication to transparency. And we love to hear people come and say, wow, it was better than I imagined.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
So we did that. And then the other thing we did was that when somebody was interested, we gave them a sample. Samples work. If you've got a good product or you've got good content, samples work. And so we tease them with a sample. Give them a chicken, give them a dozen eggs, give them a T-bone steak, give them a pound of ground beef or a pound of bacon or something. Because for the very reason that you said earlier, nobody's looking for something new. Nobody goes down the shampoo aisle and says,
no,
I've been a Head and Shoulders guy all my life, but today, for some reason, I've got a hankering for something else. Pantene Pro V, Nobody does that.
No, you don't want the decision cost even.
No.
Or the risk.
Nobody wants to make a decision.
The incremental benefit is basically zero. The risk that you first of all, it's difficult.
Yeah.
There's a whole consumer literature on this, hey? So imagine, you might think that if you went into a shop, and here's your options. You have 200 shampoos to pick from, or 4.
Yeah.
Okay, or 1. Okay, people don't like 1 because there's no choice.
Yeah.
But they don't like 200 either. And part of the reason for that is, imagine there's the best one in 200. Okay, what's your chance you're going to pick that?
You're going to pick the best
one. 1 in 200.
Yeah, it's called paralysis of choice.
Exactly.
Paralysis
And
of
so
choice,
maybe you want 4.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly right. So we'd give a sample so that they could try something new with no risk.
Right.
And what we found was a lot of times people are naturally, intuitively prejudiced to a gift more than they are something that they bought. Because when you buy something, you have buyer's remorse. When somebody gives you something, there's no remorse. And so you have this feel-good thing. Even if they're equal, the one you were given, you tend to have more
positive emotion
for than what you had to buy. And so, now I'm not saying our stuff wasn't as good. I'm just saying.
Right, but you are saying if it was equally good, that would be good enough.
You tap into these emotional things. So that was kind of our 3-pronged approach early on to kind of start and build a patron base. In fact, we don't call them customers, we call them patrons. We call them patron saints, and we address them as patron saints. This is all about.
A customer is often someone whose eyes you want to pull wool over. Whereas if you have patrons, let's say, then you treat them properly and you treat them hospitably, and you're damn happy they exist, and you want them to know that, and you remember it.
Yes. And we call this relationship marketing.
Yeah,
we're really marketing a relationship because they're not buying it because it's a label. They're buying it because they trust us. Yeah, because they trust us. And now with food choice and labeling confusion and what is a cage-free, natural, all this stuff. What is all this stuff? We've now presented ourselves as our patrons' food coach. You don't ever have to be confused again. Just buy it from us. and you'll know it's the best, and it doesn't matter.
Right. So that's another example of you identifying the problem that people have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem is
because every mom is scared to death. Am I buying the best
Yeah,
for my
of
kid?
course,
Am I
of
buying the
course.
best for my kid? So I just come in straight away and say, you never have to be concerned about that at all.
Right.
I'll solve that.
Right,
Get it
right.
from us, and you never have to worry about
right.
that
So
again.
we're hospitable. Here's some evidence.
Yeah.
You can trust us. Try our product. You'll see it's high quality.
Yeah.
Now, because you can trust us, there's a whole bunch of problems you don't have.
That's right.
Right. So you can solve them all in one fell swoop.
Yeah. That's right.
Well, and you said earlier, and this is very useful for everybody who's watching and listening to know, it's like, well, how do you sell effectively? Well, the crooked used car salesman approach to that is sell junk to idiots and laugh at them when you pull the wool over their eyes. And that'll work once.
Right.
Right. But you make an enemy. And if you do that 50 times and they tell 1,000 people, you have 50,000 enemies and you're done. And so what you want to do instead is tell people the truth and develop that relationship. Right. And so, and you also pointed out that you want to tell stories to people so that they're interested in what you're doing and so they can come along in an adventure. But you also want to listen to them so you know what their problem is. And so that's a really good way of thinking about sales is when you go out to sell, you're actually seeing if you can establish a partnership. Mm-hmm. And you can't establish a partnership if you have nothing to offer. And you have nothing to offer unless the solution you have matches the person's problem.
Exactly.
Right. So you go and say, the first thing you want to know from someone new is, well, what's your problem?
Yeah. What do you need?
Yeah.
What are you looking for? What are you looking for?
And if the answer has nothing to do with what you're selling, you should find someone else to talk to. You might be able to say, well, I know some people who could help you with that, but they're actually not someone you should partner with because your offering and their problem don't match. And then if you force that by convincing them or lying to them even, then, well, they're not satisfied because you didn't solve their problem. Plus, they're annoyed at you. Plus, even worse, if you do have a partnership with them, they're going to bend you towards their problem. And that's definitely not something you want. So you got to think of the first sales approach as an investigation.
Data brokers, those invasive tech companies, spy on your online activity, compromising your freedom. They monitor every click, action, and word, then compile and sell this information to corporations and foreign governments. These entities don't care about your welfare. That's why we use ExpressVPN, a company dedicated to protecting you from these Big Brother surveillance operations. With ExpressVPN, your entire online activity flows through secure, encrypted tunnels, ensuring complete privacy. No one, no data brokers, big tech companies, or even your internet provider can track your online behavior. ExpressVPN masks your IP address, the digital identifier that enables data brokers to collect and sell your information to questionable companies. That's why we at the Daily Wire are proud to partner with ExpressVPN. Both our hosts and production teams rest easy amidst their busy travel schedules, knowing their data isn't being compromised or sold regardless of where they're using the internet. Plus, for US customers, ExpressVPN's new Identity Defender feature removes your data from brokers' databases, monitors the dark web for your compromised information, and alerts you to unauthorized social security number usage. Using ExpressVPN is about defending your fundamental right to privacy. As our lives increasingly move online, more of our personal information becomes vulnerable to surveillance. Protect yourself with ExpressVPN today. Find out how you can get 4 months free by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description box below, or just going to expressvpn.com/Jordan today.
Well, you also have to think about it as persuasion that people don't move too far too fast. People move incrementally.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we deal with all the time is on a scale of say 1 to 10, 1 being your food comes from the gas station.
Yeah.
And let's say we're a 10. Okay. You irritate somebody if you try to move them from a 1 to a 10.
Yeah.
They're not.
That's because you're criticizing everything they do.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But if we can move them, if as a result of a discussion, a friendly discussion, a non-aggressive discussion, we can move them from a 1 to a 2.
Yeah.
Well, they're on their way.
Yeah.
And they might not buy from us, but now instead of buying from the gas station, they're going to the whatever organic section of the supermarket or something. Okay. And you gradually move them up. And so too many times in persuasion, people try to move people too fast.
Yeah.
And people resist being moved too fast.
Definitely.
And that's why you have to start with a with a question that moves you to common ground quickly if you're going to make progress. Because if you move too fast, then you lose them.
Yeah.
And now there's no discussion.
Yeah, well, they can't see a way to bridge the gap.
Right.
Plus, you're criticizing their whole lifestyle.
Right. In marketing, one of the things that we, teach and promote, through our team is no sale is an end to itself. Every sale is a springboard for the next sale.
Right, of course.
You cannot stay in business finding new customers.
Yeah.
The only way you stay in business is to please the customers you have.
Yeah.
Enough that they buzz and tell people about it and bring them back.
And that's
to
a
you.
long-term relationship. It's akin to a friendship,
long-term relationship.
right? You don't want to play with someone
Which
once.
is why you don't want to irritate somebody at your lectures or your presentations.
Yeah, because they're already in the camp.
Yeah.
Right? They're the last people you want to irritate.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
You need
They've
to
done
do
all the work in
backflips.
coming to you. Yeah,
you need to do backflips to make them happy and meet their
All right,
needs.
well, look, this has gone by very rapidly, so let me do two things. I'm going to tell everybody what we're going to do on the Daily Wire side. It's something I would have liked to have done on the YouTube side here, too. I would like to talk to you a little bit about how people can... I would like to talk about the practical steps that people could take if they're interested in knowing more about this, just conceptually or as a lifestyle, right? So let's do that on the Daily Wire side. I want to recapitulate what we've discussed and then give you an opportunity to add anything that you might want to this broader audience while you have the opportunity. So you talked about the fact that, and there's so many things we could have touched on still, that there is an agricultural enterprise, which is roughly termed now something approximating regenerative farming, which requires the use of multiple species and a particular approach to pasture management. The pasture management is a diverse, natural landscape, multiple plants that's grazed upon by herbivores that move like they do when they're migrating, that you mimic artificially. You use multiple species to fill in the ecological niches. You use birds to track the herbivores, the cows, and to sanitize the ground that they've grazed on. You rotate the cattle around through use of paddocks around your land. You maximize the amount of product that your grasslands are producing so that that's hyper efficient. You regenerate the soil so it gets thicker. That sequesters carbon. You produce high quality meat, and you can do that profitably while you're pursuing a lifestyle that's enjoyable and serving a dedicated and committed customer base. That's about that, eh? Anything else?
That's pretty good.
It is pretty good. It is pretty good.
It is pretty good.
And it's a good deal for everybody. And so
it is.
Yeah, and so you're still an enthusiastic advocate of this after 40 years as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, why? Why is that?
I'll tell you something. Most farmers my age, and I'm almost 70, most farmers my age are lonelier than they've ever been in their life.
Yeah.
Their kids are gone,
and they've had enough.
The kids are gone. It's Matilda and I by ourselves.
Yeah.
And boy, I can't get up and down off that tractor as well as I used to. That sort of. And for me, Jordan, creating this model, this farm, that yes, the multi-speciation makes it different every day. You're different animals, different things. The diversity of ecology. We've built 20 ponds, so there's ducks and there's wood ducks and there's deer and there's bear and there's wildlife and pollinators, and so there's just vibrant life and earthworms and so you have all of that. You have that aesthetic and aromatic, sensual beauty and attractiveness, and then you add the component of the social element, the people, our customers. In other words, we're not just out here hauling grain to a Cargill grain bin.
Yeah. You have a social community.
Every day there are people at the farm saying, so thank you for what you do. You're just, our family depends on you. Thank you. And from our day one, our kids grow up, with our customers pinching them on the cheek saying, we just think your parents are the coolest in the world, and thank you for being a part of this. And so here I am, 22 of us now basically earn a full-time living from the farm. And I'm surrounded now by these 20s and 30s-year-old, the oldest ones are in their early 40s now, but these team and these young people that are just can't wait to do what I've done. And every day they think I'm cool, and they want to do this. And so, I mean, I just break down in tears when I explain the blessing and the gratitude that I have, that at this stage in my life, I'm surrounded by this youthful enthusiasm.
Yep. Yeah. Understood.
To appreciate what I've spent a lifetime carving out, and they will now take it to new heights that I never dreamed of.
Yeah, well, and there's so many things that are advantageous to this that we didn't even discuss too, because the approach that you're taking, if that was duplicated at a larger scale, also makes for a much healthier livestock with a much higher quality life and much more resilient farms and more decentralized food production and less reliance on chemicals and both fertilizers and pesticides and
pharmaceuticals and
no antibiotic overutilization, which is a very major thing. And regeneration of the soil and carbon sequestration So we hear all this nonsense at high levels among the globalists about the fact that agriculture is a net pollutant and that we have to radically cut back, for example, on our meat consumption, which is something that's like, oh, I see. So everybody's going to have a little brain because they eat nothing but plants. That's your damn theory, right? And so you hear about these
Well, if we're all eating beans, that might solve the gas problem.
Yeah, well, that's also apparently Bill Gates has a solution to that. That's pharmaceutical as well.
Yeah, some Bovira or
yes, exactly. There's a putting the cart before the horse, and so it's very optimistic to hear about such approaches because they seem to be producing a variety of social goods simultaneously and is in a truly resilient and sustainable way. So, well, thank you very much, sir, for coming to talk to us today. And we'll turn to the Daily Wire side, and I think we'll go more into the nuts and bolts of this, maybe talk a little bit more about the issues of resilience and sustainability as well. But if you're looking for a practical guide to how this sort of lifestyle might be, well, at least participated in, but possibly pursued, then join us on the Daily Wire side. And thank you very much to the film crew here. Where are we today? Evansville. Sorry to everybody in Evansville, Indiana. Yeah. And so I had a show here last night, and so it's a lovely place, and we've been happy to be here. And it was very good to meet you, sir.
It was wonderful.
Thanks very much for the conversation. Thanks to all of you on the YouTube side, and join us over on the Daily Wire side for a continuation of this conversation. Thank you.